You've just written the book Adaptive Space. Tell me the story of Adaptive Space. How did it come about? What's the thinking behind it?
Yeah, so we live in the era of disruption, and we're here talking about disruption today. We certainly see it in the world. A University of Washington study predicts that 40% of the current S&P 500 companies will no longer exist just a decade from now. So we live in this era of disruption, and yet we're doubling down on old methods. We're doubling down on old change theories, and we were just a small group of academics. We're just really interested in why is it that some organizations can adapt and other organizations just struggle. They constantly struggle with adaptation. So we went out and conducted research, and we went and talked to practitioners, and we met. Spent a ton of time mapping on organizations with organizational network mapping, studying how ideas flow in and out of organizations. And Adaptive Space is really the synthesis of those findings. It's the synthesis of, in the age of, or in the era of disruption, what are some of the new tools we should be deploying in order to help enable organizations to adapt more readily? So that's the background, the backdrop on the whole thing.
So I love that story, the fact you've grounded research, you've really understood those organizations that can adapt and what it takes to get there. And you talk a lot about energy and networks, and particularly the role that energy and networks are going to play in the future. Tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah, so I think our big surprise in this research was how much of this is driven by energy and social connections inside of organizations. We think of organizations as these hierarchical entities. We think of them as a set of practices and really smart people being brought together. And what we discovered was that's all true, but in addition to that, you need to think about the social arrangements. You need to think about how do we connect people with other people? How do we connect ideas with other ideas? And energy is, I think of energy as the lifeblood of organizational agility. And energy is like the carrier. It's like the superconductor of getting ideas from one pocket to another pocket, or connecting people across individual silos, if you will. And energy is the carrier. So I really believe, and we can talk much more about this, but I really believe this concept of energy is going to become growingly more important for organizations, even far beyond what we've seen and have thought about with engagement.
And I think one of the remarkable things you've done, and you talk about in your book, is how you've been able to unleash energy within General Motors, which is going through such a huge change. Mm-hmm. How has Adaptive Space helped you to begin the transformation of General Motors?
Yeah, so it flips the lens. So it challenges you to think about, rather than saying what we don't have and starting from a deficit-based perspective, like we don't have this skill or we don't have that resource, it actually challenges you to think about what do we have and how do we unleash that potential. So, every organization has this latent potential, either deep inside or, sort of pushed off to the edge inside the organization. So, the concept of adaptive space, and I need to say this, I rarely use the language adaptive space. I rarely use the label adaptive space because it can get in the way. But the concepts within and the construct of how do you create these free trade zones where people can openly share, how do you tap into the power of energizers, how do you build bridges inside of an organization as conduits to carry ideas, and even the social arrangements and the social connections we create. That's all instrumental in sort of catalyzing the organization to be more bold and to positively disrupt itself.
And I know you've been on a real journey with General Motors where you've unleashed that energy. Yeah. What are a few things that you've done that you're particularly proud of where you've seen that energy just become free?
Yeah, and I think there are two levels to talk about this on. You've heard me, Simon, talk about super tankers and speedboats, right? And we think of organizations as these giant super tankers, and they are. And they need to be. That's not going away, nor should it. It delivers at scale and with precision and with durability and all those things. But we also need speedboats. We need to make these growth bets, and we need to very intelligently think about how do we position those bets within an organization. So that's one. So I think of adaptive space at two levels. I think of it from a leadership standpoint. It's about how do we teach leaders to think about social arrangements and organizational arrangements in a whole different way. So no longer the one size fits all, but tapping into the power of the matrix, leveraging the capacity of a network. But it's also about the employees. how do you actually provide hope for employees that live deep inside, the bottom levels of the supertanker, and how do you teach them, to really, how do you empower them? How do you embolden them to really sort of, live their passions and to go find other people that believe in what they do? So it's this whole concept of providing hope for employees deep inside of an organization and providing constructs for leaders to think about how do they create different arrangements for employees and the organization as a whole.